The crystal glass shattered against the marble floor, cutting through the smooth jazz playing in the background. The penthouse perched high above the rainy streets of Portland went completely silent. Kendra stood at the head of the long dining table holding a small wooden box. She held it by the corner as if it carried a disease, letting the warm light of the chandelier illuminate its simple carving. "Look at this," Kendra said, her voice dripping with absolute disgust. "He actually brought this to our 10th anniversary dinner." The guests, a collection of the Portland elite, stared in uncomfortable silence. Marcus stood at the opposite end of the room, his worn gray suit, a stark contrast to the sea of designer gowns and custom tuxedos. He kept his hands clasped in front of him, feeling the rough fabric of his cuffs. Andre stepped forward, swirling the amber liquid in his heavy glass. He looked at Marcus, his own father, with a sneer that twisted his handsome face. "Are you joking right now?" Andre asked, his voice echoing in the large room. "We invited the mayor, we invited the board of directors, and you show up looking like a janitor?" Kendra dropped the wooden box onto the table. It landed with a dull thud right next to a towering centerpiece of white orchids. A hand-carved clock. Kendra laughed, a sharp sound that grated against the ears. "What are we supposed to do with this, Marcus?" "Put it next to the imported Italian sculptures." "It smells like a garage," she added, waving a manicured hand in front of her face. Marcus did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He looked at the clock, the hours he had spent sanding the rich mahogany, thinking of the day Andre was born. He had built it to last a lifetime, just as he thought a family should. But looking at the cold eyes of his son, he realized he had built a monument to a ghost. "You always do this," Andre said, slamming his glass down on the table. "You drag us down. I'm trying to close a massive real estate deal and my partners have to look at you. You embarrass me, Dad. You embarrass my wife. Look at your shoes." Andre pointed, a cruel smile forming. "They are scuffed. They belong on a construction site, not in a penthouse." A few guests chuckled, trying to align themselves with the host. The sound was like acid burning through the remaining threads of Marcus' patience. But he held his ground, his face a mask of calm discipline. "We told you to dress appropriately," Kendra said, stepping closer to Andre. "We offered to buy you a suit, but you always have that stubborn pride. Well, your pride is ruining my night. I spent $50,000 on the catering alone, and you bring a piece of scrap wood." Marcus noticed the heavy gold watch on Andre's wrist. He noticed the diamond necklace resting on Kendra's collarbone. He recognized them. He knew exactly which accounts they were tied to, the very accounts he had quietly established to secure their future. They were using his own shields as swords against him. Andre walked over to the table and picked up the wooden clock. He turned it over, examining the crude hinges. "You know what this tells me?" Andre asked, looking back at the crowd. "It tells me you have no respect for my success. You want to remind everyone that we came from nothing. You want to play the humble martyr while I'm out here conquering the city." Marcus took a slow breath, letting the air fill his lungs. He remembered the long nights working double shifts at the shipping yards, sacrificing his own comfort so Andre could attend the best schools. He remembered paying the massive tuition bills, ensuring his son never felt the sting of poverty. Now that same son stood in a penthouse using his education to articulate his hatred. "I made that clock by hand," Marcus said, his voice quiet but steady. "It took me 3 months. "Then you wasted 3 months," Kendra snapped. "Nobody wants your handmade junk, Marcus. We are not a charity case anymore. We are the elite. We fly private. We wear tailored clothes. We do not need a reminder of your pathetic little workshop." Andre tossed the clock back onto the table. It slid across the polished wood, knocking over a crystal wine glass. Red wine spilled across the white linen tablecloth, looking like a fresh wound. "Get out," Andre said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Marcus looked at the spilled wine, watching it soak into the fabric. He looked back at his son. "What did you say?" Marcus asked, perfectly calm. "I said get out," Andre repeated, pointing toward the heavy oak doors of the penthouse. "You are ruining the aesthetic. You are ruining the vibe. Go back to your little house and leave us alone. We will send you a check for the holidays if we remember." Kendra laughed, a sound that sliced through the heavy tension in the dining room. She picked up her glass of imported champagne and took a slow, deliberate sip. She wanted the entire room to watch her, to see her ultimate triumph over the man who had always been a quiet shadow in their lives. She walked around the long mahogany table, her silk gown trailing behind her like a royal cape. "Look at you, Marcus," she said, her voice echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You stand there in your cheap shoes and you judge us. You think you are better than us because you work with your hands. But your hands are empty, old man." She raised her left arm, extending her wrist to ensure the chandelier light caught the massive diamond bracelet she wore. "This bracelet," she sneered, "cost more than you made in 5 years at the shipping yard. Andre bought it for me yesterday at the most exclusive jeweler in Portland." She tapped the sparkling stones with a manicured fingernail, creating a sharp, clicking sound. "We do not need your little wooden boxes, Marcus. We have platinum cards with no limits. We have investment portfolios that generate more in a day than you will see in a lifetime." Marcus remained completely still, his face an impenetrable mask of stone. He did not look at the guests, who were now whispering among themselves, eager to witness the destruction of an outsider. He looked only at Kendra and then at Andre. He saw the pride in his son's eyes, the twisted satisfaction of watching his own father be degraded. Marcus did not argue because there was nothing left to say. He registered the profound ingratitude, letting it burn away the last remnants of his fatherly blindfold. Kendra was not finished, the cruelty fueling her energy. She walked right up to him, invading his personal space, the cloying scent of her expensive perfume suffocating the air. "You do not belong in our world, Marcus," she whispered loudly, ensuring the front row of guests heard every single word. "This penthouse overlooks the entire city, and you are just a speck on the pavement below. When we invite the mayor to dinner, we expect our family to elevate our status, not drag it through the mud. You are an anchor, Marcus. You are a heavy, rusting anchor, and we are finally cutting the chain." Andre stepped up beside his wife, placing a protective hand on her lower back, as if Marcus were the one posing a threat. "You heard her, Dad." Andre said, his voice cold and devoid of any familial warmth. "The evening is over for you. The security guard will escort you to the service elevator. We cannot have you walking through the main lobby looking like a vagrant." Marcus looked at the young security guard who had nervously stepped out from the shadows near the foyer. The guard looked apologetic, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable with the brutal family dynamic playing out in front of him. Marcus gave the young man a brief, reassuring nod. He did not want the guard to feel bad for simply doing his job. Marcus turned his attention back to the table, looking at the spilled red wine soaking into the white linen and the discarded wooden clock he had spent months building. It was a perfect metaphor for the 30 years he had spent building a life for Andre. All the overtime shifts, all the missed holidays, all the quiet sacrifices had been tossed aside, ruined by the intoxicating arrogance of fake wealth. "I understand," Marcus said, his voice deep and rumbling, carrying an unshakable calm that unsettled the room. He did not shout, he did not beg, and he did not show a single ounce of fear. "I hear you clearly, Andre, both of you." Kendra rolled her eyes, crossing her arms over her chest. "Just leave, Marcus," she commanded, pointing toward the heavy double doors. "Go back to your dusty house and leave the future to us." Marcus slowly buttoned his worn gray suit jacket, a quiet gesture of dignity amidst the hostility. He looked at the wealthy guests, the politicians, and corporate executives who stared back at him with a mix of pity and disgust. They thought they were looking at a defeated old man, a relic of the working class who had overstayed his welcome in high society. They had absolutely no idea who was really standing in the room. He turned around and began the long walk toward the exit. His footsteps were heavy and measured, echoing on the marble floor. He did not look back. He did not pause. He simply walked past the imported statues, past the towering floral arrangements, and past the sneering faces of the Portland elite. The security guard opened the heavy oak doors for him, keeping his eyes averted out of respect. Marcus stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, the sounds of the lavish party instantly muffled as the doors clicked shut behind him. The air in the hallway was cool, a stark contrast to the heated venom of the penthouse. He walked toward the service elevator just as Andre had ordered. The metal doors slid open with a hollow scrape, revealing a small, unadorned cabin meant for caterers and cleaning staff. Marcus stepped inside and pressed the button for the underground parking garage. The elevator descended, taking him away from the ungrateful son he had raised and plunging him toward the cold, hard reality of what he had to do next. The sadness that had gripped his heart for the past hour slowly began to harden into something else entirely. The father who had come to celebrate an anniversary had died in that penthouse. The man riding the elevator down was someone else. As the service elevator rattled its way down the towering skyscraper, Marcus stared at the scuffed metal doors. The physical descent mirrored the emotional drop he had just experienced, but his mind was already calculating the logistics of the fallout. He remembered the arrogant smirk on Kendra's face when she tapped her diamond bracelet. He remembered Andre bragging about the catering costs and the unlimited platinum cards. They were so incredibly proud of their financial fortresses, completely unaware that the walls were made of paper, and Marcus held the only match. He reached into the pocket of his gray trousers, his rough fingers brushing against a sleek, modern smartphone. It was not the cheap, outdated device he pretended to use around them. It was a secure, encrypted lifeline to the true source of their arrogant power. The elevator came to a sudden halt, the doors sliding open to reveal the damp concrete expanse of the underground parking level. The smell of exhaust fumes and wet asphalt filled his lungs, clearing away the lingering stench of Kendra's suffocating perfume. He stepped out into the dim light, the echoes of his own footsteps serving as the only soundtrack to his absolute resolve. Marcus walked out of the concrete parking garage and stepped onto the rain-slick streets of downtown Portland. The cold rain was a sudden shock, a freezing downpour that instantly soaked the shoulders of his cheap gray suit. But he did not shiver and he did not run for cover. He stood on the curb, letting the icy water wash away the last traces of his fatherly guilt. He looked up at the towering glass skyscraper, his eyes tracking the illuminated windows of the penthouse suite. Up there, Andre and Kendra were laughing, pouring expensive wine and celebrating their cruel victory. Down here, Marcus was preparing the execution. A sleek black Maybach glided smoothly through the downpour, its tires hissing against the wet pavement. The massive vehicle pulled up to the curb, stopping exactly where Marcus stood. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in a sharp black suit, stepped out, instantly opening an umbrella to shield Marcus from the storm. "Good evening, sir," the driver said, pulling open the heavy rear door. Marcus slid into the spacious leather interior, the quiet cabin instantly muting the roar of the Portland storm. The ambient lighting glowed a soft blue, illuminating the polished wood trim. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the encrypted smartphone. He did not dial the number. He simply pressed a single button connecting directly to a private line in a high-security legal office. The line rang once before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Jules speaking," the voice said, sounding sharp and awake despite the late hour. "Jules," Marcus said, his voice dropping the waver of the tired old man and taking on the hardened tone of a corporate titan. "It is Marcus." Sir Jules replied, a subtle shift in tone indicating total attention. How was the anniversary dinner? It was very enlightening, Marcus said, watching the rain streak across the tinted passenger window. My son made it perfectly clear where I stand in his life. He called me a rusting anchor, Jules. He threw me out of the building. There was a brief silence on the other end, the heavy silence of a lawyer calculating the incoming storm. I am sorry to hear that, Sir Jules said. What are your orders? The time for patience is over. Marcus commanded, his grip tightening on the phone. They are so proud of their wealth, Jules. They are so proud of the platinum cards and the luxury cars. They think they built that empire. I want you to show them who actually owns the bricks. Understood? Sir Jules said, the sound of rapid typing echoing over the secure line. Which accounts do we touch? All of them, Marcus said, his voice cold and precise. Trigger the revocation clause on the primary trust. Freeze every single checking and savings account tied to Andre and Kendra. Cancel the platinum credit cards immediately. I want the balances frozen and the lines of credit reduced to zero. The typing grew faster, a staccato rhythm of financial destruction. The trust is locked, Sir Jules confirmed. The credit networks will process the freezes within the next 2 hours. What about the physical assets? Call the property management group, Marcus ordered. Issue a default notice on the penthouse lease. They are living there under the corporate umbrella, and I am closing the umbrella. Call the country club and suspend their memberships for non-payment. And Jules, make sure you notify the luxury auto dealership. That sports car Andre drives is registered to my holding company. Tell them to repossess it at dawn. It will be a bloodbath, Sir Jules noted, his voice devoid of pity. By tomorrow morning, they will not be able to buy a cup of coffee. They will have nothing. They will have exactly what they earned, Marcus corrected him. They wanted to cut ties with the old man in the cheap suit. I'm just granting their wish. And Jules, do not answer any calls from them. Let them hit the wall at full speed. Yes, sir, Jules said. It is already in motion. The banks are processing the holds right now. Have a good night, sir. Marcus ended the call, the screen fading to black. He placed the phone on the leather armrest and leaned back against the plush seat. The Maybach accelerated smoothly, carrying him away from the towering skyscraper and into the dark, rainy night. He felt the vibration of the powerful engine, a mechanical heartbeat that mirrored his own steady resolve. He had spent his entire life building a safety net for his family, shielding them from the harsh realities of the world. He had absorbed their insults, paid their debts, and funded their arrogant lifestyles. But the safety net was gone now. The financial umbilical cord was officially severed. Tomorrow morning, Andre and Kendra would wake up in their lavish penthouse, surrounded by expensive art and Italian sculptures. They would pour their coffee entirely unaware that the foundation of their entire existence had just been ripped away. They thought they had expelled a weak old man from a party. They did not realize they had just declared war on a king. Take me home, Marcus told the driver. The real work begins tomorrow. The morning sun pierced through the massive windows of the Portland Exotic Auto Gallery. Andre walked across the polished showroom floor, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking with arrogant authority. He wore a crisp, white designer shirt, unbuttoned just enough to show his heavy gold chain. He felt absolutely invincible, completely high on the power trip from the night before. He had finally kicked his embarrassing father out of his life, proving who controlled the family legacy. Now he was ready to celebrate, to reward himself for his ruthless behavior. He approached the sleek silver sports car sitting in the center of the room. A young salesman in a sharp blue suit hurried over, a massive smile plastered on his face. Good morning, Mr. Andre. The salesman greeted, practically bowing as he approached. We have the paperwork ready for the new vehicle, just as you requested. Excellent work, Andre said, running his hand along the smooth curve of the silver hood. My wife and I had a very successful anniversary dinner last night, so I decided to finalize this little toy today. Let us wrap this up quickly. I have a massive real estate meeting at noon, and I want to arrive in style. The salesman led Andre to a sleek glass desk near the back of the showroom. Andre sat down in the plush leather chair, crossing his legs with supreme confidence. He reached into his tailored slacks and pulled out a heavy titanium black card. He tossed it onto the glass desk, the metal making a satisfying clink. "Run it for the down payment," Andre ordered, waving his hand dismissively. $50,000 and put the rest of the balance on my standard corporate lease. The salesman nodded eagerly, taking the heavy black card with both hands. He slid it into the sleek card reader on his desk. The machine beeped a sharp electronic sound. A red light flashed on the small screen. The salesman frowned, his thick eyebrows pulling together in slight confusion. "My apologies, Mr. Andre," the salesman said, his voice dropping a fraction of an octave. "It seems the network is experiencing a slight delay. The screen says declined." Andre scoffed, rolling his eyes in absolute annoyance. "Your machine is broken," Andre snapped, leaning forward to tap the glass desk. "Do you know how much money is in that account? It is a black card. There is literally no limit. Try it again and do it right this time." The salesman swallowed hard, his eager smile turning brittle. He ran the card through the reader a second time, dragging the magnetic stripe carefully. The machine beeped twice a harsh warning tone. The red light blinked rapidly. The screen flashed a severe security code the salesman rarely saw. "Sir," the salesman said, his voice trembling slightly, "it is not a network error. The card is officially listed as frozen by the issuing bank. They are instructing me to confiscate the physical card immediately." "Confiscate it," Andre practically shouted, slamming his open palm on the glass desk. "Are you completely out of your mind? I am your best client. Get your general manager out here right now before I buy this entire dealership and fire you today." The sudden commotion drew the attention of the general manager. A tall man with graying hair walked over from a private glass office, his face serious and completely unreadable. "Is there a problem here?" the manager asked, looking from the terrified young salesman to the highly irate Andre. "Your idiot employee is telling me my primary account is frozen," Andre yelled, standing up to intimidate the older man. "I want this sports car right now, and I want a profound apology." The manager picked up the black card and looked closely at the embossed name. He walked over to his own terminal, linked directly to the luxury credit bureaus. He typed in the information rapidly, his eyes scanning the digital readout. Andre stood there, crossing his arms over his chest, waiting for the inevitable apology. He smirked fully, expecting the manager to grovel for the sheer disrespect. The manager stopped typing. He stared at his monitor for a long, silent moment. He did not look apologetic. He looked incredibly grim. "Mr. Andre," the manager said, his voice completely devoid of the usual retail warmth, "I just checked the direct secure terminal. Your primary black card is not just frozen. It has been aggressively revoked." "Revoked." Andre echoed the word, sounding entirely foreign on his tongue. "That is impossible. Call the private banker. There is obviously a massive misunderstanding." Andre reached into his expensive leather wallet, pulling out 3 more platinum credit cards. He threw them onto the desk like a desperate gambler. "Here, use the corporate expense card. Use the offshore reserve account. Use the joint account I share with Kendra. Just run the damn numbers, process the 50,000, and give me the keys." The manager picked up the additional cards, swiping them one by one through the main reader. Decline, decline, decline. A chorus of angry red beeps filled the quiet luxury showroom. Other wealthy customers turned their heads, watching the pathetic scene unfold with polite disgust. "Every single one of these accounts is completely locked," the manager stated, his tone turning cold and brutally professional. "The security codes indicate a total asset freeze initiated by the primary trust holder early this morning. You have absolutely zero available credit, sir." Andre felt a sudden cold sweat break out on his forehead. The intense arrogance evaporated in a split second, replaced by a sudden choking panic. Trust holder. Andre muttered, his mind racing to understand the impossible data. What are you talking about? I control the corporate accounts. Actually, sir, the manager said, pulling a printed legal fax from a tray on his desk. I just received this urgent notice from the Central Holding Group 10 minutes ago. We are legally instructed to immediately repossess the luxury SUV you drove here in. It belongs to the corporate fleet, and your driving authorization has been permanently terminated by the true owner. Andre took a stumbling step back, his legs suddenly feeling weak. The manager stepped around the desk and held out an open palm. I'm going to need the keys to the SUV right now, Mr. Andre. And I must ask you to leave the premises immediately, as we do not conduct business with insolvent individuals. The crisp morning air carried the scent of eucalyptus and expensive citrus floating through the private spa of the exclusive Portland Country Club. Kendra lounged on a plush white chaise, wearing a silk robe that dragged elegantly across the heated marble floor. She held a crystal glass of mimosa, her freshly manicured fingers resting gently against the delicate stem. Across from her, a prominent socialite named Brenda filed her nails, listening intently as Kendra bragged about the anniversary dinner. We had to throw him out, Brenda, Kendra said, taking a slow sip of her drink. He showed up in this hideous cheap suit, looking like he crawled out of a dumpster. I mean, we are the elite now. We cannot have that kind of poverty dragging down our brand. Brenda nodded in agreement, staring enviously at the massive diamond bracelet catching the morning light on Kendra's wrist. It is absolutely exhausting, Brenda murmured, dealing with people who just do not understand our level of success. Kendra smiled, a venomous and triumphant smile, completely unaware that her level of success was currently evaporating into thin air. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out her premium platinum credit card. She dropped it carelessly onto a silver tray held by a passing attendant. Put the entire spa day on my tab, Kendra ordered, waving her hand dismissively. And bring us another bottle of the imported champagne, the expensive one from France. The attendant bowed slightly, taking the silver tray and disappearing down the long, mirrored hallway. Kendra leaned back, closing her eyes and letting the warm steam of the spa envelop her. She felt like a queen, a ruler of her carefully curated social kingdom. But the peace was abruptly shattered just 10 minutes later. The heavy glass doors of the spa lounge swung open and the general manager of the country club walked in. He was a stern man, dressed in a flawless charcoal suit, and he did not carry the usual deferential smile. He walked directly toward Kendra, holding her platinum card between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a piece of trash. "Excuse me, madam," the manager said, his voice loud enough to turn the heads of every wealthy woman in the room. Kendra opened her eyes, deeply annoyed by the sudden interruption. "What is the problem now?" Kendra snapped, sitting up and adjusting her silk robe. "I asked for champagne, not a conversation." The manager did not flinch, his face remaining entirely stoic. "There is a significant problem with your payment method," he stated, placing the platinum card back onto the small glass table next to her. "The card has been declined by the issuer." Kendra laughed out loud, a harsh and grating sound that echoed off the tiled walls. "Declined," she repeated, looking at Brenda with a look of absolute disbelief. "Do you know who my husband is? Do you know how much money is in that account? Run it again. Your machine is obviously broken. I assure you, madam," the manager replied, his tone dropping an octave into pure ice. "Our machines are functioning perfectly. I personally contacted the concierge desk at your bank to resolve the issue. They informed me that this account, along with every other account under your name, has been completely frozen." A dead silence fell over the spa lounge. Brenda stopped filing her nails, her eyes widening in sheer shock. The other women in the room leaned forward, eager to witness the sudden downfall of the arrogant queen. Frozen Kendra whispered, her face suddenly draining of color. "That is impossible. Call Andre right now. He will fix this immediately. I'm afraid your husband cannot help you, the manager continued, pulling a formal letter from his breast pocket. I also received a direct communication from the primary trust holding your membership. They have officially revoked your sponsorship to this club, citing severe financial insolvency. You are no longer a member here, Kendra. The use of her first name without the respectful title struck Kendra like a physical blow. She stood up abruptly, her silk robe slipping slightly off her shoulder. You cannot speak to me like that, she screamed, her voice cracking with sudden panic. I pay your salary. I demand to speak to the board of directors. You do not pay anyone anymore, the manager said, stepping back and signaling to two large security guards waiting by the door. Your tab for today is currently unpaid, and we will be sending the bill to collections. I must ask you to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises immediately. Kendra looked around the room, her chest heaving with rapid breaths. She looked at Brenda, searching for an ally, searching for someone to defend her honor. But Brenda simply picked up her magazine, completely turning her back on Kendra, instantly severing their fake friendship. The social exile was immediate, and it was absolutely brutal. You are making a massive mistake, Kendra threatened, to tears of absolute humiliation stinging her eyes. When my husband hears about this, he will ruin you. The two security guards stepped forward, their massive frames casting long shadows over her. Please proceed to the locker room, one of the guards ordered, pointing toward the exit. Do not make us remove you by force. Kendra grabbed her designer handbag, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the leather straps. She walked past the staring faces of the Portland elite, the very women she had tried to impress just moments before. She heard their quiet whispers, the muffled laughter, the absolute destruction of her social standing. She was escorted out of the pristine spa, marched through the grand lobby like a common criminal, and pushed out the heavy front doors into the cold morning air. She stood on the edge of the manicured driveway, clutching her useless platinum card, completely and entirely alone. Andre burst through the heavy oak doors of the penthouse, his chest heaving with frantic breaths. He'd been forced to walk 3 miles in the freezing Portland rain because his luxury ride application was suspended for insufficient funds. He threw his soaking wet designer jacket onto the pristine white marble floor, not caring about the mess. Kendra was already pacing the length of the massive living room, her makeup completely smeared down her cheeks. She still wore her spa robe, having taken a humiliating taxi ride home, promising the angry driver she would bring cash downstairs. What is going on? Kendra screamed, running toward him with absolute terror in her eyes. My cards are entirely frozen, Andre. The country club manager humiliated me in front of everyone, and security threw me out into the street. Fix this right now. I cannot fix it, Andre yelled back, his voice cracking with a high pitch of panic. The dealership took the sports car, Kendra. They literally demanded the keys and told me I was totally insolvent. Every single black card is dead, the offshore accounts are locked, and the private banker will not even take my calls. They stood in the center of the lavish room, surrounded by imported Italian furniture and priceless modern art, suddenly feeling like trespassers in a museum. The absolute arrogant high of the anniversary dinner had completely evaporated, leaving them with a crushing, suffocating reality. It has to be a mistake, Kendra muttered aggressively, biting her perfectly manicured thumbnail. A massive banking error. A system crash. We have millions, Andre. We are the elite of the city. Before Andre could formulate a desperate lie to comfort her, a loud, sharp pounding echoed from the front entrance. It was not the polite, soft knock of their private concierge. It was the heavy, authoritative strike of law enforcement. Andre froze, his heart slamming against his ribs like a trapped bird. He slowly walked to the foyer, his expensive leather shoes squeaking on the wet marble. He pulled open the heavy door, revealing 2 uniformed police officers and the stern building manager. Mr. Andre, the building manager, said, his voice entirely devoid of its usual submissive warmth. These officers are here to enforce an immediate writ of possession. A writ of what? Andre stammered, his eyes darting between the unsmiling officers. This is my penthouse. I have a 10-year lease. You cannot just come to my door and threaten me. The manager handed Andre a thick stack of legal documents bound by a heavy blue clip. You do not have a lease, sir, the manager corrected him bluntly. The holding company that owns this unit and holds the master lease issued a total termination notice this morning. You have exactly 24 hours to vacate the premises, or these officers will physically remove your belongings to the street. Andre stared at the thick stack of papers, his hands shaking violently. Kendra walked up behind him, peering over his shoulder, her breath hitching in her throat. Read the name of the holding company, the manager instructed, pointing a stiff finger at the top of the legal document. Andre forced his eyes to focus on the bold print at the top of the eviction notice. Ironclad Logistics and Trust. Andre read aloud, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. He recognized the name instantly. It was the small, quiet corporate entity his father used to manage his retirement funds. But the numbers attached to the trust on this document were absolutely staggering. This says, the trust holds the title to the penthouse, Kendra pointed out, her finger trembling against the paper, and it holds the title to the cars, Andre. Look at the attached asset list. Andre flipped to the second page, his stomach plunging into an endless abyss. The legal document laid out the brutal, undeniable truth with cold, forensic precision. Every single asset they claimed to own, every piece of wealth they flaunted at the anniversary dinner was legally registered to Ironclad Logistics. The luxury vehicles, the offshore reserve, accounts, the platinum credit lines, even the massive diamond bracelet currently sitting on Kendra's wrist. They were all paid for and controlled by Marcus. He owns everything, Andre whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a freight train. He did not just co-sign for us, Kendra. He is the sole proprietor of the holding company. We are literally just authorized users on his massive empire. Kendra snatched the papers from his hands, her eyes scanning the brutal legal text. He lied to us, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the empty foyer. He walked around in cheap suits and let us believe we built this wealth. He is a multi-millionaire, Andre, and he hid it from us. He did not hide it. Andre realized, feeling a cold sweat break out across his back. He just never felt the need to brag about it like we did. He let us play rich while he held the keys to the kingdom. And last night, Kendra realized, her eyes widening in absolute horror. Last night we mocked him. We called him a rusting anchor, and we threw him out of his own penthouse. The building manager cleared his throat completely, unsympathetic to their massive family revelation. 24 hours, the manager repeated, turning on his heel. I suggest you start packing, and I will be waiting by the service elevator to collect the keys. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving Andre and Kendra utterly alone in the massive, silent penthouse. The crushing weight of their spectacular failure pressed down on them. They had spent years treating Marcus like a pathetic burden, a poor old man who needed their charity. Now the grand illusion was completely shattered. They were not titans of industry, they were just parasites, and the host had finally cut them off. But the absolute worst part was not the eviction or the canceled credit cards. As Andre stood trembling in the foyer, his cell phone buzzed in his pocket, a harsh, vibrating reminder of a much darker reality. He pulled it out and looked at the blocked caller ID. The financial squeeze was tightening, and the corporate banks were the least of his immediate problems. The money he owed to the legitimate world was gone, but the money he owed to the underground was about to come due. We have to pack, Andre told Kendra, his voice hollow and dead. We have to get out of here right now before Desmond finds out we are broke. Kendra dropped the eviction notice onto the floor, her legs finally giving out. She collapsed onto the marble tiles, burying her face in her hands as the walls of their fake empire came crashing down around them. Andre left Kendra sobbing on the marble floor and sprinted toward the private elevator. He slammed his palm against the call button, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He clutched a leather duffel bag to his chest, stuffed with the few designer watches and loose cash he managed to sweep from his dresser. He needed to secure a getaway vehicle, something untraceable, before the corporate lawyers locked down the entire building. The elevator doors slid open and he stepped inside, pressing the button for the sub-basements. The descent felt like a freefall into pure nightmare, a total reversal of the arrogant climb he had enjoyed just the night before. The elevator chimed and the doors parted to reveal the lowest level of the residential parking structure. It was a vast subterranean cavern of cold concrete illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and motor oil, a sharp contrast to the expensive cologne he usually wore. Andre stepped out cautiously, his expensive leather shoes echoing loudly in the dead silence of the underground vault. He scanned the rows of empty parking spaces, looking for the exit stairwell, praying he could slip out unnoticed. He pulled his jacket tight against the chill, feeling like a hunted animal in his own building. Suddenly, the piercing glare of high-beam headlights flooded the concrete ramp ahead. A massive black SUV, heavily armored and completely devoid of license plates, rolled silently out of the shadows. It moved with the predatory grace of a shark, completely blocking the only exit path. Andre froze in his tracks, the leather duffel bag slipping slightly in his sweaty grip. He recognized the vehicle instantly. It was the signature transport for Desmond, the most ruthless underground creditor in Portland. Andre had borrowed heavily from Desmond, using his father's unseen wealth as collateral to fund high-stakes offshore gambling and illicit real estate bridges. The heavy doors of the SUV clicked open, the sound echoing sharply against the concrete pillars. Two massive men stepped out into the harsh, fluorescent light, their sheer size making Andre look like a fragile child. They wore dark, tailored suits that stretched tightly across their muscular frames. The lead enforcer, a man with a scarred jawline named Silas, closed his door with a quiet, terrifying thud. Silas did not rush. He walked toward Andre with slow, measured steps, letting the sheer terror of the moment marinate. Going somewhere in a hurry, Andre Silas asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate the concrete floor. Andre took a stumbling step backward, his back hitting a cold cement pillar. Silas Andre stammered, trying desperately to project a confidence he absolutely did not possess. "What are you doing here?" "I told Desmond I would transfer the funds by the end of the week." "You have my word as a gentleman." Silas stopped a few feet away, tilting his head as if observing a pathetic insect. "Your word as a gentleman?" Silas repeated, a cruel smirk twisting his scarred face. "That is a very funny joke, Andre, because my boss received a very interesting phone call this morning. Word on the street is you are no longer a gentleman of means. In fact, word on the street is you do not even own the suit you are wearing." Andre felt his stomach completely drop out. He knew the criminal underworld had deep connections in the banking sector, but the speed of this information leak was absolutely staggering. "It is a temporary liquidity issue." Andre lied, his voice pitching higher in pure panic. "A clerical error with the primary trust, Silas. I have millions tied up in the logistics company, you know that. Just give me 48 hours to clear the corporate red tape." Silas stepped right into Andre's personal space, the sheer physical threat radiating from him like heat from a furnace. He reached out with a massive, calloused hand and grabbed the lapel of Andre's expensive jacket. He slammed Andre hard against the concrete pillar, knocking the breath completely out of his lungs. The leather duffel bag dropped to the floor, spilling a few designer watches onto the oil-stained concrete. "Do not ever lie to me again," Silas whispered, leaning in so close Andre could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "We know everything, Andre. We know the holding company evicted you. We know every single black card is frozen. We know your father pulled the plug and left you drowning in the deep end. You are totally and completely broke, and you owe Desmond $2 million. $2 million, the number hung in the damp air like a death sentence. Andre had lost it all on terrible offshore bets, completely convinced he could just borrow against the family trust indefinitely. He had played the high roller, the arrogant prince of Portland, using phantom money that never truly belonged to him. Now the phantom had vanished, leaving him alone with real deadly monsters. I can get it, Andre choked out, struggling to breathe against the crushing pressure of Silas' hand. I can get the 2 million. My father is loaded. He's just teaching me a lesson, Silas. He will not let me die over this. If you hurt me, you get absolutely nothing. The second enforcer, who had remained silent in the background, stepped forward and picked up a heavy gold watch from the floor. He inspected it for a brief second and then crushed the crystal face under the heel of his heavy boot. Desmond does not care about your family drama, the second man stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. Desmond only cares about the ledger, and right now your ledger is bleeding red. Silas released his grip on Andre's jacket, letting the disgraced son slide slowly down the concrete pillar. Andre hit the floor, gasping for air, rubbing his bruised chest. He looked up at the two towering enforcers, realizing his arrogant charm and fake wealth were entirely useless down here in the dark. He was cornered, stripped of his armor, and facing the brutal, violent consequences of his own spectacular greed. Silas crouched down, bringing his scarred face inches from Andre. "You owe $2 million," Silas repeated, letting the massive number hang in the damp air. "And since your corporate umbrella just snapped shut, Desmond wants his money right now in cash." "I do not have 2 million in cash," Andre gasped, pressing his back harder against the concrete pillar. "The accounts are frozen. You have to give me time to talk to my father. He's just angry he will bail me out like he always does." Silas reached into his tailored suit jacket and slowly pulled out a sleek black cellular phone. He tapped the screen with a massive thumb and held it out toward Andre. A video began to play, showing the exterior of the luxury penthouse building, panning up to their exact balcony. Then the video cut to a dark alley, showing a man tied to a chair, screaming in pure agony as a shadow moved over him. Andre squeezed his eyes shut, turning his head away from the terrifying footage. "Turn it off," Andre pleaded, tears of genuine panic streaming down his face. "I understand, I get the message." Silas slipped the phone back into his jacket and stood up to his full, towering height. "You have exactly 48 hours. Silas stated, his tone as cold as the concrete floor. 2 days, Andre. If the $2 million is not wired into the offshore account by Friday at midnight, we are not coming back to talk. We are coming back to collect, and we will take it out of your flesh and the flesh of your beautiful wife." "Please," Andre begged, clutching his hands together in a pathetic display of submission. "Do not bring Kendra into this. She does not know anything about the debt. Desmond does not care about your marital secrets," the second enforcer chimed in, stepping back toward the armored SUV. "You lived like a king on borrowed money, and now the crown is falling off. 48 hours, Andre. Do not try to run, because we own the airport security and we own the highways out of Portland." The two massive men climbed back into the black SUV, the heavy doors shutting with a synchronized, terrifying thud. The engine roared to life, echoing loudly in the underground cavern. Andre sat frozen on the floor, watching the red tail lights disappear up the concrete ramp, leaving him in near total darkness. The reality of his situation crashed over him like a suffocating tidal wave. He was not just broke, he was a walking dead man. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his bruised chest. He grabbed his leather duffel bag, leaving the crushed gold watch on the floor, and sprinted back toward the service elevator. He mashed the call button repeatedly, his hands shaking so violently he could barely press the plastic panel. The doors slid open and he threw himself inside, riding the metal box back up to the penthouse of horrors. He burst through the service doors and ran down the long, carpeted hallway. He slammed through the entrance of their unit, locking the heavy deadbolt behind him as if it could keep out the inevitable reality. Kendra was in the master bedroom, frantically throwing designer dresses and silk scarves into a massive leather suitcase. "We have to leave," Kendra cried out, not even looking up, as Andre stumbled into the room. "I called my sister in Seattle. She will not even pick up the phone." The news is spreading, Andre. Everyone knows we are totally bankrupt. We are social pariahs. Andre dropped his bag onto the expensive wool rug, his face completely drained of blood. Seattle will not save us. Andre whispered, his voice trembling with absolute unadulterated terror. Nothing will save us, Kendra. We are completely out of time. Kendra stopped packing, sensing the profound shift in his energy. She looked at his bruised face, his torn designer jacket, and the sheer panic vibrating in his eyes. "What happened to you?" she asked, dropping a handful of silk blouses onto the mattress. "Where's the sports car? Why did you come up the service elevator?" "Desmond found me," Andre confessed, falling onto the edge of the large bed. "His enforcers trapped me in the parking garage, Kendra. They know about the trust, they know about the eviction, they know my father cut us off." Desmond. Kendra repeated the name, sounding foreign and dangerous on her lips. "The underground casino guy, the one you said you paid off last year." "I lied," Andre shouted, his voice cracking under the immense pressure. "I never paid him. I just kept rolling the debt over, using the trust as leverage. I owe him $2 million, Kendra. $2 million in cash, and the account is entirely frozen." Kendra felt her knees buckle and she sank onto the floor, pulling her silk spa robe tight around her body. $2 million, she gasped, the massive number completely short-circuiting her brain. "We do not even have $200 right now, Andre." "The platinum cards are dead. What did they say to you?" "They gave us 48 hours. Andre replied, burying his face in his shaking hands. 2 days, Kendra. If we do not pay the debt by Friday night, they are going to kill me. And they said they are going to kill you too." "They cannot do that, Kendra," shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "We will call the police. We will hire private security. We are important people, Andre. We are nobody." Andre screamed back, his own terror exploding into raw anger. "The police will not protect us from Desmond. They will just arrest me for the illegal offshore wire transfers. We cannot hire security because we cannot even pay for a taxi. My father was the important person, Kendra. We were just the parasites living on his back, and now he is gone." Kendra stared at the expensive luggage scattered across the room, realizing none of it mattered. The designer clothes, the imported shoes, the diamond bracelets, they were totally useless. They could not sell them fast enough to raise $2 million, and they could not outrun the enforcers who already owned the city streets. They were trapped in a glass cage in the sky, completely surrounded by a luxury they no longer owned, waiting for the executioners to arrive. "You are a complete fraud," Kendra shrieked, her voice tearing through the silent luxury bedroom. She grabbed a handful of expensive silk ties from the open custom closet and threw them directly at his face. $2 million in underground gambling debts, Andre. You played the big corporate titan for the cameras, but you were just a degenerate addict spending phantom money that never even belonged to you. Andre stood up from the edge of the mattress, his own sheer terror instantly morphing into a violent and defensive rage. "Do not you dare act like a victim here," Andre roared, kicking the heavy leather duffel bag entirely across the hardwood floor. "You love the money, Kendra. You love the imported sports cars and the private jet charters, and you never once asked how I paid for them. You just demanded more luxury every single day of your pathetic life." Kendra stepped closer to him, her spa robe slipping entirely off her shoulder, revealing the massive diamond bracelet. She held up her wrist, shaking the diamonds in his face like a weapon. "I demanded the lifestyle of a successful husband," Kendra spat, her eyes wild with absolute panic. "I did not demand you borrow millions from a psychotic mob boss. You signed our death warrant, Andre. Silas is going to murder us because you were too stupid to read a financial ledger." Andre let out a harsh and bitter laugh, a sound that bordered on sheer madness. "I kept us afloat for years," Andre yelled, pointing a heavy, trembling finger right between her eyes. "My father paid the massive bills because I knew how to manage his guilt. I knew how to keep him quiet and keep the accounts open, but you ruined it, Kendra. You just could not keep your arrogant mouth shut last night." "What are you talking about?" Kendra snapped, stepping back as if he had physically struck her. You threw him out! Andre yelled, his face turning a deep and furious red. You mocked his cheap clothes right in front of the mayor. You called his handmade clock a piece of scrap wood, and you demanded security march him to the service elevator. You told the secret billionaire holding our only leash that he was a rusting anchor. You literally begged him to cut us off, and he finally listened. I was protecting our exclusive brand. Kendra screamed, picking up a heavy crystal perfume bottle from the vanity. He humiliated us, Andre. He looked like a janitor at our $50,000 anniversary dinner. The dinner you paid for with his money, Andre shot back, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. You spent 50 grand on organic catering, and then you spit in the face of the only man who could keep the enforcers away from my throat. You killed us, Kendra. You killed us with your absolute suffocating arrogance. Kendra hurled the heavy crystal bottle right at his head, putting all her desperate terror into the throw. Andre ducked instinctively, and the expensive perfume bottle smashed directly into the large vanity mirror. The glass shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces, raining down onto the expensive marble counter and filling the room with the suffocating scent of jasmine and roses. You spineless coward, Kendra shrieked, her hands pulling at her own hair in pure, unadulterated hysteria. You were blaming me because you could not act like a real man. A real man protects his wife, Andre. A real man does not beg his daddy for a monthly allowance and then cry when the bank cuts up his platinum cards. Andre crossed the room in 2 massive strides, his shoes crunching over the broken mirror glass. He grabbed her by the shoulders, his grip tight enough to leave deep bruises, and shook her violently. Wake up! Andre screamed right into her face, spittle flying from his lips. The allowance is entirely gone. The penthouse is gone. In exactly 48 hours, our lives are completely gone. Desmond does not care about your social brand, Kendra. Desmond is going to send his massive enforcers into this exact room, and they are going to tear you apart just to get his $2 million. Kendra stopped fighting his tight grip, the horrific reality finally piercing through her defensive, blinding rage. Her knees gave out completely under the immense pressure, and she collapsed against his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. What do we do? Kendra wept her hot tears soaking into his torn designer shirt. We have absolutely no cash, Andre. We cannot go to the police because you committed massive wire fraud, and we cannot run away from the mob. Andre let her slide down to the hardwood floor, his own energy completely and entirely depleted. He looked at the shattered vanity mirror, seeing his own fractured, terrified reflection in the broken shards. He looked at the designer luggage scattered uselessly across the room, realizing they were trapped in a gilded cage of their own making. We have to bypass the frozen accounts, Andre muttered, his mind racing through a dark, desperate labyrinth of criminal survival. The primary trust is locked down tight by the corporate lawyers, but the physical assets are still there. The massive life insurance policies are still there. My father built an absolute fortress of wealth, Kendra, but every fortress has a weak point if you are willing to break the law to find it. Andre stepped away from the shattered glass, his expensive leather shoes crunching over the fragments. He began to pace the length of the massive bedroom, his mind racing through the dark corners of financial law. The primary trust is completely frozen, Andre muttered, talking more to himself than to his weeping wife. Jules, the corporate lawyer, locked it down tight, probably revoking every single letter of authorization I ever signed. We cannot touch the real estate, and we cannot touch the corporate holding accounts. Kendra sniffled, wiping her smeared makeup with the back of her trembling hand. Then what are you talking about? She asked, her voice raspy from screaming. You said there was a weak point, Andre. You said there was a way to get the $2 million in cash. There is a way, Andre said, stopping at the edge of the large window and looking out over the rainy Portland skyline. But it requires a massive, irreversible shift in our current reality. He turned back to look at her, his eyes cold and entirely devoid of any human empathy. When my mother passed away 10 years ago, my father updated his entire estate plan. He created the trust to avoid massive taxes, but he also took out a monumental life insurance policy. He told me it was a safety net designed to instantly cover the estate taxes so the physical assets would not have to be liquidated. Kendra slowly pushed herself up from the hardwood floor, her survival instincts finally overpowering her sheer panic. A life insurance policy? Kendra repeated the words, rolling off her tongue like a desperate prayer. How much is the policy worth, Andre? $5 million, Andre stated the massive number hanging in the quiet room, heavy with dark implications. $5 million in pure untaxed cash, Kendra. And the absolute best part is life insurance payouts do not go through the corporate trust. They bypass the legal freeze entirely, going directly to the primary listed beneficiary. And you are the primary beneficiary, Kendra asked, stepping closer to him, her eyes widening with a sudden toxic hope. I am the only son, Andre confirmed, a dark and twisted smile forming on his bruised face. I am the sole beneficiary on the entire $5 million policy. If that policy triggers, the insurance company will wire the funds directly into my personal checking account, completely bypassing Jules and his corporate locks. We take $2 million to pay off Silas and Desmond, and we keep $3 million to start over anywhere in the world. Kendra looked at the designer luggage scattered across the floor, and then looked back at her husband. The sheer terror of the mob enforcers was slowly being replaced by the intoxicating allure of $5 million in cash. But the policy only pays out upon death, Kendra whispered, stating the brutal and obvious reality. Your father is in perfect health, Andre. He exercises every single day, and he eats like a monk. We have exactly 48 hours before Desmond sends his massive killers to this penthouse. We cannot just wait for him to die of old age. Andre walked over to his heavy mahogany nightstand and opened the top drawer. He pulled out a crumpled, damp piece of paper. It was a copy of the emergency medical profile, the one his father always kept updated for the corporate logistics file. He does not have perfect health. Andre corrected her, his voice dropping to a terrifying conspiratorial whisper. He has a severe chronic heart condition, Kendra. He hides it well, but he takes a highly specific nitroglycerin pill every single night. Without that medication, a sudden spike in physical stress would trigger a massive fatal cardiac event. Kendra stared at the medical paper in his hand, the horrific pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. You want to trigger a heart attack? Kendra asked, her voice entirely flat, devoid of any moral outrage. You want to murder your own father, Andre, to pay off your underground gambling debts. Andre stepped right up to her, gripping her shoulders with a frantic, terrifying energy. I do not want to murder anyone, Andre hissed, his eyes wide and completely manic. But Silas is going to skin us alive, Kendra. He crushed a gold watch into dust just to make a point. If we do not deliver $2 million by Friday night, we are both dead. My father lived a long, full life, and he just threw us out into the street to die. This is not murder, Kendra. This is absolute survival. Kendra looked deep into his terrified eyes, searching for any hesitation, any lingering shred of familial love. She found absolutely nothing, just a pathetic, cornered animal willing to chew off its own leg to escape the trap. She thought about the massive enforcers in the parking garage, and she thought about the $5 million in untaxable cash. The choice was not even a difficult one in her dark and greedy mind. If we do this, Kendra said, her voice turning as cold as the Portland rain hitting the glass window. It cannot look like a murder, Andre. The insurance company will launch a massive forensic investigation for a $5 million payout. If they find a single shred of foul play, they will freeze the claim, and we will still be dead on Friday. It will not look like foul play. Andre promised, his mind rapidly calculating the horrific logistics of patricide. It will look like a tragic, unavoidable accident. A poor old man, overwhelmed by the harsh elements, suffering a fatal heart attack in the wild. Nature will do the heavy lifting for us, Kendra. We just have to put him in the right place at the exact right time. Andre opened the sleek silver laptop, placing it gently on the glass coffee table in the center of the ruined living room. The bright screen illuminated his bruised face, casting long, dark shadows against the expensive wallpaper. Kendra knelt beside him on the expensive wool rug, pulling her silk robe tightly against the chill of the unheated penthouse. The building manager had already cut off the climate control, a brutal reminder of their impending eviction. "What exactly are we looking for?" Kendra asked, her voice a sharp, nervous whisper. "We need a specific environment," Andre replied, his fingers flying across the quiet keyboard. "We need a place that is naturally hostile, a place where people disappear by accident every single year." He pulled up a highly detailed topographical map of the rugged Oregon coast. The jagged coastline stretched out on the glowing screen, a chaotic mix of deep water and sharp volcanic rock. "I'm looking for a dead zone," Andre explained, his eyes scanning the digital terrain. "No cell phone towers, no tourist facilities, and absolutely no paved hiking trails." Kendra leaned closer to the bright screen, her greed entirely suppressing her initial panic. She watched as Andre zoomed in on a completely isolated stretch of shoreline, a treacherous cove located 2 hours west of the city limits. "Look at this spot right here," Andre pointed, tapping the screen with a trembling finger. It is a massive rocky inlet surrounded by sheer vertical cliffs. The locals call it a tidal trap. The beach is completely accessible during low tide, but when the ocean rolls back in, the water rises over 10 feet in less than an hour. Kendra felt a cold thrill run down her spine, recognizing the lethal perfection of the geographic trap. So the ocean does the actual killing. Kendra clarified her mind, racing ahead to the insurance payout. "We just make sure he is standing in the wrong place when the freezing water comes rushing back in." "Exactly." Andre nodded, pulling up a highly complex meteorological chart. "The water temperature out there is roughly 50 degrees all year round. The absolute shock of the freezing ocean combined with the extreme physical exertion of trying to climb those jagged rocks will instantly overload his fragile cardiovascular system. It is a guaranteed physiological overload, Kendra. His heart will simply explode from the massive stress." "But what if he just takes his medication?" Kendra asked, her eyes narrowing with calculating suspicion. "You said he carries those little nitroglycerin pills everywhere he goes. If his chest starts hurting, he will just pop a pill and wait for the Coast Guard to rescue him. He will not have the pills," Andre stated, his voice dropping into a dark, dead monotone. "He keeps his emergency medication in that small brown leather messenger bag, the one he always carries strapped across his chest. We drive him out to the desolate cove under the guise of a heartfelt family apology. We park the leased sports SUV at the top of the steep gravel trail. We hike down into the rocky inlet together, acting like everything is completely fine. And right before the massive tide rolls in, we separate him from the leather bag." "I can do that," Kendra volunteered eagerly, the vision of $5 million erasing every shred of her human conscience. "I will tell him to take off the ugly brown bag for a nice family photograph by the crashing waves. I will hold it for him, and then we just turn around and run back up the steep trail. We lock the car doors." Andre added, his eyes completely wide and manic. "We drive away, taking his only lifeline right back to Portland. He will be entirely trapped at the bottom of the cove, staring at the rising ocean with absolutely no way to stop the massive cardiac event. By the time anyone finds his body, if the aggressive tide does not wash him out to sea first, the medical examiner will just rule it a tragic, natural death. A foolish old man who misjudged the treacherous Oregon coast." Kendra stared at the digital map, visualizing the entire horrific sequence. It was brilliant, it was brutal, and it was the only way to pay off Desmond in 48 hours. "What is our official alibi?" Kendra asked, needing to ensure every single loophole was tightly closed. "The insurance investigators will ask exactly why we left him alone in the wild. We tell them a story of tragic family reconciliation." Andre fabricated, his voice smoothing out into a fake grieving tone. "We tell the police we went to the coast to apologize for our terrible behavior at the anniversary dinner. We stopped at the scenic overlook to take pictures, and he simply wandered off down a side trail. We tell them we searched the dark woods for hours, screaming his name completely out of our minds with worry. We act like the devastated, heartbroken children who lost their beloved patriarch to a terrible hiking accident. Kendra smiled, a slow, venomous expression that reached all the way to her cold eyes. She reached out and touched his bruised cheek, her touch surprisingly gentle amidst the horrific planning. $5 million in untaxable cash, Kendra whispered, tasting the massive number on her tongue. It pays off the mob debt, and it gives us the freedom to leave this miserable, bankrupt city forever. Andre closed the silver laptop, the sudden darkness matching the heavy atmosphere of the ruined penthouse. We have to move incredibly fast, Andre said, standing up from the glass coffee table. The massive high tide peaks at exactly 7 in the evening tomorrow. We need to get him in the car, drive him to the coast, and leave him on the rocks by 6. If we miss the tidal window, Silas is going to murder us in our sleep. I will pack a warm coat, Kendra said, standing up and adjusting her silk robe. Call him right now, Andre. Turn on the tears, beg for his forgiveness, and get him into the trap. Andre sat on the edge of the unmade bed, staring at the blank screen of his smartphone. The penthouse was completely silent, stripped of its artificial warmth by the building manager. He took a deep breath, letting the freezing air fill his lungs, preparing himself for the greatest performance of his pathetic life. He needed to sound completely broken, utterly devastated by the loss of his father. He closed his eyes, thinking about the massive enforcers in the parking garage, letting the genuine terror of his massive mob debt fuel his tears. Make him believe it, Kendra whispered, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed tightly over her silk robe. Do not just apologize, Andre. Beg him. Tell him you realize we are nothing without him. Andre nodded, a single tear rolling down his bruised cheek. He pressed the call button, listening to the dial tone echo in the empty room. It rang 3 times each ring, stretching his absolute panic closer to the breaking point. Finally, the line clicked open. Hello, Marcus, answered his voice, deep and entirely devoid of emotion. Dad. Andre choked out, letting a dramatic sob break his voice. Oh my God, Dad, please do not hang up. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Andre could hear the faint sound of traffic, guessing his father was walking through the rainy Portland streets. What do you want? Andre Marcus asked, his tone guarded and extremely cold. I am so sorry, Andre wept, clutching the phone with a white-knuckled grip. I'm so incredibly sorry for last night. I was a monster, Dad. I was blinded by the arrogance and the fake friends and the stupid money. When you left the penthouse, it felt like the entire world collapsed on me. I realized what a terrible son I've been to you. You made your feelings very clear, Marcus stated calmly. You called me an anchor. You threw me out into the rain. I was wrong. Andre wailed, forcing more tears to spill from his eyes. I was so incredibly wrong, Dad. I do not care about the money. I do not care about the trust. I just want my father back. Please, I am begging you to forgive me. I cannot sleep. I cannot eat, knowing how much I hurt you. Kendra watched him, a slow, toxic smile spreading across her face. She gave him a subtle thumbs up, entirely impressed by his psychopathic ability to fake genuine human emotion. I do not know what you expect me to say, Marcus replied, a slight hesitation entering his voice. 30 years of sacrifice, Andre, and you tossed it away for a country club membership. I know, Andre pleaded, wiping his face with the back of his trembling hand. I am a fool, Dad, but I want to fix this. I want to look you in the eye away from this toxic city and beg for your forgiveness like a real man. Please, just give me one afternoon. Let me drive you out to the Oregon coast tomorrow. We can walk along the cliffs just like we did when my mother was still alive. Just you and me, Dad. No fancy dinners, no distractions. The mention of his late wife was the ultimate emotional weapon. Andre knew his father still carried a massive, unresolved grief for her. He knew it was the one lock he could always pick the final tether of unconditional love. The coast. Marcus repeated, his voice softening just a fraction of an inch. It is going to rain tomorrow, Andre. The roads are dangerous out there. I will drive slow, Andre promised, eagerly sensing the trap slowly clicking shut. We just need to get away from Portland, Dad. We can go to that isolated rocky cove, the one past the state park. I just need to breathe the ocean air and talk to you. Please, Dad. If you say no, I completely understand, but I have to try to save our family. The silence stretched on for a full minute, hanging in the freezing air of the ruined penthouse. Andre held his breath, praying to whatever dark gods were listening that his father still possessed a fatal flaw of forgiveness. I will go. Marcus finally agreed, the deep timbre of his voice carrying a heavy, weary resignation. I will meet you downstairs at 3 in the afternoon. Do not be late, Andre. Thank you. Andre cried out, injecting pure, fake relief into every single syllable. Thank you, Dad. I love you so much. See you tomorrow. Andre ended the call, pulling the phone away from his ear. The transition was absolutely instantaneous. The tears stopped flowing, the dramatic sobbing vanished entirely, and his bruised face hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. He looked up at Kendra, his eyes completely devoid of any lingering humanity. He bought it, Andre stated, his voice dropping back into a cold, flat monotone. He's going to meet us tomorrow afternoon wearing his little brown leather bag of heart pills. Kendra walked over to him, leaning down to kiss his bruised cheek. You are a brilliant liar, Andre, she whispered, her eyes shining with the promise of $5 million. We have the bait now, we just have to deliver him to the ocean. They sat in the dark, freezing penthouse surrounded by the useless remnants of their fake empire. They did not feel an ounce of guilt plotting the brutal execution of the man who had given them everything. They only felt the terrifying pressure of the 48-hour deadline and the intoxicating, venomous thrill of the approaching high tide. The heavy tires of the rented gray Jeep crunched violently over the wet gravel. The sound grated against the tense silence inside the cabin like fingernails dragging across a chalkboard. The Portland rain had turned into a relentless coastal storm, lashing against the windshield with a brutal driving force. The windshield wipers squeaked back and forth, struggling to clear the freezing water matching the frantic, irregular heartbeat hammering inside Andre's chest. They had left the smooth paved highway 30 minutes ago. Now they were navigating a treacherous, winding dirt road, plunging deep into the isolated Oregon coastline. The massive pine trees closed in on both sides, blocking out the gray afternoon light, creating a claustrophobic tunnel of dark green shadows. Andre gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were completely white. He kept his eyes locked straight ahead, his jaw clenched in absolute rigid terror. He was sweating profusely despite the freezing temperature inside the cheap rental vehicle. The heater was barely working, blowing a weak stream of lukewarm air, a pathetic downgrade from the climate-controlled luxury cars he had driven just yesterday. Kendra sat in the passenger seat, her posture impossibly stiff. She wore a thick, expensive designer trench coat completely out of place for a rugged coastal hike. She kept turning her head, throwing fake, overly sweet smiles over her shoulder, checking on the quiet passenger in the back seat. Are you comfortable back there? Dad? Kendra asked, her voice dripping with a sickening artificial warmth. We can try to turn the heat up a little more if you are feeling cold. I am fine, Kendra. Marcus replied, his voice a low, steady rumble over the noise of the engine. He sat perfectly still in the cramped back seat, wearing a simple waterproof jacket and sturdy hiking boots. His thick, calloused hands rested comfortably on his knees. Strapped securely across his broad chest was the worn brown leather messenger bag containing his vital heart medication. He looked at the back of his son head, reading the absolute panic radiating from Andre's rigid shoulders. Marcus was an expert in logistics, a man who spent 40 years calculating risks and identifying fatal structural flaws in massive shipping networks. He could read the structural flaws in his own family with terrifying clarity. He noticed the dark purple bruise forming along Andre's jawline, a brutal mark that was definitely not there at the anniversary dinner. "You hit a rough patch of road yesterday," Andre Marcus noted calmly, pointing a thick finger at the rearview mirror. "Your face looks like you went a few rounds with a heavyweight fighter." Andre flinched the Jeep, swerving slightly toward the deep, muddy ditch before he corrected the steering wheel. "It is nothing," Dad Andre stammered, his voice pitching higher in pure, unadulterated stress. "I just tripped in the parking garage this morning looking for the rental car. I hit my face on a concrete pillar. It was totally stupid. He is so clumsy when he is stressed," Kendra chimed in quickly, aggressively covering the lie. "He was just so entirely devastated about our terrible fight last night he could barely see straight. We are just so grateful you agreed to come out here to let us properly apologize." Marcus did not respond to her toxic, sugary words. He simply watched the treacherous terrain rolling past the wet windows. This was not a tourist destination. This was a dead zone. There were no scenic overlooks, no safety guardrails, and absolutely no cell phone reception. He knew exactly where they were heading because he had spent decades mapping the intricate coastal shipping lanes. They were driving directly toward the jagged, isolated tidal traps. The silence stretched out again, heavy and suffocating, filled only by the roar of the massive engine and the aggressive pelting rain. Andre was fighting a massive internal war, his mind flashing between the terrifying image of Silas, the mob enforcer, and the physical reality of his father sitting right behind him. He needed the $5 million insurance payout, but the sheer logistical horror of the upcoming betrayal was making his hands shake violently. "We are almost there," Andre muttered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Just a few more miles down this ridge and we can park at the trailhead." "Take your time," son Marcus said, his tone entirely even devoid of any fear or suspicion. "The ocean is not going anywhere, and neither am I." Kendra shifted in her seat, her eyes darting toward the brown leather bag strapped to Marcus' chest. She licked her lips, her greed completely overpowering her nervous energy. "That bag looks a little heavy for a hike," Dad Kendra suggested, trying to sound helpful and completely innocent. "Why do not you just leave it in the Jeep when we get to the cove? You do not want it getting soaked in this terrible rain, do you?" Marcus looked down at the worn leather strap and then looked directly into Kendra's eyes through the rearview mirror. A cold, piercing intelligence burned behind his quiet gaze, a look that made Kendra instantly look away, her heart skipping a guilty beat. "I think I will keep it on me." "Kendra." Marcus replied softly, his hand resting protectively over the leather flap. A man should always carry his own weight, especially when he is walking on slippery rocks. You never really know when your heart might give out on you. The dirt road narrowed significantly, forcing the rented Jeep to crawl along the edge of a massive, plunging ravine. The violent sounds of the crashing ocean began to echo through the dense pine trees, a low and terrifying boom that vibrated through the floorboards of the vehicle. The sky above them turned a dark, bruised purple, signaling the rapid approach of the evening high tide. Marcus felt a slight familiar pressure in the center of his chest, a dull warning ache from his fragile cardiovascular system. He breathed in slowly, counting the seconds, refusing to let the physical stress show on his face. He knew they were leading him into an ambush, and he was walking right into the center of the kill zone. Andre let out a sharp, involuntary gasp, his foot pressing down harder on the gas pedal. The Jeep lurched forward, throwing mud and gravel into the dense forest, racing desperately toward the edge of the brutal waiting cliffs. The rented Jeep slammed to a violent halt, skidding aggressively across a thick patch of slick coastal mud. They had reached the absolute undeniable end of the treacherous dirt road. Andre threw the gearshift into park, his chest heaving with rapid, terrified breaths. Through the rain-streaked windshield, the desolate Oregon coast stretched out in pure, brutal majesty. It was a massive, isolated rocky cove entirely walled in by sheer, black cliffs on three sides. The freezing ocean crashed violently against the jagged stones below, sending explosive plumes of white saltwater high into the darkening, bruised sky. Marcus looked out the side window, his seasoned eyes instantly scanning the highly hostile environment. There were absolutely no other cars, no safety railings, and no signs of human civilization for miles. It was a perfect, completely natural execution chamber. He felt a deep, primal alarm bell ringing in his head, a survival instinct forged by 40 years of managing dangerous, heavy machinery at the shipping port. "We are finally here," Andre announced, his voice cracking slightly over the roaring sound of the coastal storm. "This is the spot I was telling you about, Dad. The absolute perfect place for us to clear the air and completely start over as a family." Marcus did not move a single muscle. He sat in the cramped back seat, his thick, calloused hands resting firmly on his waterproof knees. He recognized the specific, dangerous layout of the isolated cove. It was a lethal tidal trap, a geographical bowl designed by brutal nature to drown anyone foolish enough to walk on the lower rocks during the evening surge. "It is raining pretty hard out there," son Marcus noted, his voice a low, steady rumble that completely contrasted with the frantic energy of the vehicle. "Perhaps we should just talk right here safely inside the dry cabin." Kendra whipped her head around, her eyes wide with a frantic, highly toxic desperation. "Oh, please, Dad," Kendra insisted, unbuckling her seatbelt with a loud electronic click. "We drove all the way out here into the middle of absolute nowhere just to show you how deeply and truly sorry we are. We just want to walk down to the water edge and take one nice family photograph to symbolize our fresh start. Is that really too much to ask after everything we maliciously put you through?" Andre opened his driver's side door, the freezing, violent wind instantly howling into the warm, stale cabin. He stepped out into the brutal storm, his expensive city clothes immediately soaking through with freezing rain. He walked around to the back of the dirty Jeep, pulling the heavy rear door open for his father. "Come on, Dad," Andre yelled, leaning into the cabin to make himself heard over the crashing, thunderous waves. "Just 5 minutes on the rocks, I promise you. I need you to look at the massive ocean with me and tell me you forgive my terrible, arrogant mistakes." Marcus looked at his only son, seeing the pathetic, desperate fear deeply etched into his bruised, wet face. He knew Andre was entirely lying. He knew the apology was a complete, calculated fabrication engineered for a much darker purpose. But Marcus needed to see exactly how far his own flesh and blood was willing to go for a payout. Marcus slowly shifted his heavy weight, wincing slightly as a sharp, sudden pain flared in his lower back, a harsh reminder of his advancing age. He placed his heavy hiking boot onto the slippery, muddy ground and stepped out of the protective vehicle. The Oregon storm hit him like a physical, freezing blow. A solid wall of aggressive wind and icy rain instantly chilled him to the absolute bone. Kendra scrambled out of the passenger side, pulling the wide collar of her designer trench coat tight against her pale neck. She marched immediately toward the edge of the steep, slippery gravel trail, leading directly down into the deep bowl of the rocky cove. "This way," Kendra ordered, waving her manicured hand with a fake, highly enthusiastic energy. "The view is absolutely breathtaking down by the dark tide pools." Marcus followed them, his steps slow, calculated, and deeply deliberate. He kept his right hand resting securely over his brown leather messenger bag, feeling the small plastic contour of his life-saving pill bottle through the thick, wet leather. The steep descent was incredibly treacherous. The loose, wet gravel shifted dangerously under his boots, threatening to send him tumbling down the sharp volcanic incline. Andre walked slightly behind him, keeping his distance, completely failing to offer a stabilizing hand to his elderly father. They reached the bottom of the deep cove, standing on a massive, flat expanse of wet, slippery black rock. The freezing ocean surged violently just 50 feet away. The massive dark waves were growing larger and much more aggressive by the minute, driven by the intense coastal storm. Marcus looked down at his heavy boots, immediately noticing the dark, wet water lines deeply etched high on the surrounding cliff walls. The evening tide was not just coming in, it was rushing in with lethal, undeniable speed. He felt a familiar dull ache pressing against his sternum, his fragile heart reacting to the extreme cold and the physical exertion of the steep hike. He took a slow, deep breath, maintaining his absolute outward composure. They had brought him to the exact center of the natural kill zone, right on schedule, completely unaware that their helpless prey was secretly a highly observant predator. The wind whipped violently through the desolate cove, carrying the freezing spray of the rising ocean. "Stand right over there by that massive rock," Kendra shouted, pointing her manicured finger toward the treacherous edge of the black water. "The lighting is absolutely perfect for our family picture, Dad." Marcus looked at the jagged stone located dangerously close to the surging, freezing tide. He did not move a single inch. "I think I am fine right here, Kendra." Marcus replied, his voice a low, steady rumble against the howling Oregon storm. "The water is coming up entirely too fast, and my chest is starting to ache from the extreme biting cold." Andre shifted his weight nervously from foot to foot, his eyes darting frantically between his father and the steep gravel trail. "Just take the picture quickly," Andre urged, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic. "We are running completely out of time, Kendra." Kendra stepped aggressively toward Marcus, pulling a sleek smartphone from her expensive designer trench coat. She raised the camera, framing the shot, but then she let out a loud, highly exaggerated sigh of utter frustration. Dad, Kendra whined, stomping her expensive boot on the wet rock. "That ugly brown leather bag is completely ruining the aesthetic of the photo. It makes you look like a homeless vagrant, and this is supposed to be a beautiful memory." "I need to keep the bag on me," Marcus stated firmly, wrapping his thick, calloused hand around the worn leather strap. "My heart medication is inside this bag. Kendra, and my chest is already feeling incredibly tight." "Oh, stop being so incredibly dramatic," Kendra snapped, dropping her fake sugary sweetness entirely. "We are literally going to be here for 2 more minutes, Marcus. You are not going to die from taking off a stupid bag for a photograph." Before Marcus could even brace himself on the slippery rocks, Kendra lunged forward with surprising vicious speed. She grabbed the thick leather strap of the messenger bag with both hands and yanked it violently over his head. The sudden aggressive motion threw Marcus completely off balance. His heavy hiking boots slipped on a patch of wet, slick algae. He stumbled backward, his bad knee buckling under his massive weight, and he fell hard onto the unforgiving, jagged volcanic stone. A sharp, blinding pain shot up his leg, but it was absolutely nothing compared to the sudden, crushing weight pressing down on his chest. The physical shock of the fall, combined with the extreme freezing temperature, instantly triggered his fragile cardiovascular system. He gasped for air, clutching his waterproof jacket, as his heart began to flutter with a terrifying, irregular rhythm. "My pills," Marcus choked out, struggling to push himself up from the sharp, wet rocks. "Give me the bag back right now, Kendra." Kendra stood over him, holding the brown leather bag tightly against her chest. She looked down at the old man writhing on the freezing stones, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. She did not see a father, she only saw a $5 million insurance payout waiting to clear her massive debts. "I think I will just hold on to this for you," Kendra sneered, a cruel, venomous smile twisting her lips. "It really does clash with your outfit anyway." "Let us go, Andre," she yelled, turning her back on him completely. "The tide is coming in fast, and we have a very long drive back to Portland." Andre stood frozen for one single second, staring at his father gasping on the wet rocks. The sheer, horrific reality of the patricide washed over him, clashing violently with his terror of Silas, the mob enforcer. Dad Andre whispered, a pathetic, cowardly tear mixing with the freezing rain on his bruised face. I'm so sorry, but I just do not have a choice. Andre turned around and began sprinting up the steep, treacherous gravel trail, running away as fast as his expensive shoes could carry him. Kendra was already halfway up the massive incline, scrambling desperately toward the safety of the rented vehicle. Wait! Marcus shouted, his voice a ragged, desperate croak over the roaring ocean. Andre, look at me. Do not do this to me. I am your father. I built everything for you. They did not stop, and they did not look back. Marcus lay on the freezing rocks, the crushing pressure in his chest growing exponentially worse with every single passing second. He watched their blurry silhouettes reach the top of the steep ridge. He heard the heavy metallic slam of the Jeep doors closing, followed instantly by the electronic chirp of the automatic locks engaging. The powerful engine roared to life, a mechanical growl that completely drowned out his final plea for mercy. He saw the red tail lights of the gray Jeep illuminate the dark, towering pine trees. The tires spun aggressively in the wet mud, kicking up a massive spray of dirt and gravel before the vehicle violently accelerated down the winding dirt road. The red lights quickly faded into the dense, dark forest, leaving him entirely and completely abandoned. The heavy silence rushed back into the isolated cove, replaced immediately by the terrifying, thunderous boom of the rising ocean. The freezing waves crashed closer to his boots, sending icy salt spray directly into his face. He checked his empty pockets, a habit from a lifetime of careful, precise logistics. He had absolutely nothing left. They had taken his phone, his identification, and his vital nitroglycerin pills. He was trapped at the bottom of a massive rocky bowl, with a failing heart and a lethal freezing tide rolling in fast. The brutal Oregon storm howled above him, sounding like the cruel, mocking laughter of the children who had just sentenced him to death. Marcus pressed his hand hard against his chest, trying to manually soothe the erratic, violent beating of his failing heart. The water level rose another agonizing inch, creeping over the thick rubber soles of his hiking boots. He needed to find higher ground immediately, but his leg was throbbing with an intense burning agony. He looked up at the sheer vertical cliff walls, realizing they offered absolutely no path to salvation. He was entirely at the mercy of the elements, left to become a tragic, profitable accident for his greedy, ungrateful son. The cold began to seep deeply into his bones, a numbing, paralyzing chill that signaled the absolute beginning of the end. The freezing ocean did not care about the betrayal, and it certainly did not care about his broken heart. A massive wave slammed aggressively against the black volcanic rock, sending a heavy sheet of icy salt water directly over Marcus. The extreme biting cold felt like 1,000 sharp needles piercing his thick waterproof jacket, immediately soaking his clothes underneath. He gasped loudly, his lungs seizing from the absolute shock of the freezing Pacific temperature. The water quickly retreated, creating a powerful, terrifying suction that threatened to drag his heavy boots right into the churning, violent depths. He knew he had to move instantly, or he would simply become another tragic, profitable statistic for his son. Marcus dug his thick, calloused fingers into the wet, razor-sharp crevices of the jagged stone. He pulled his massive weight forward, dragging his injured, throbbing leg behind him like a useless anchor. Every single inch of forward progress was an absolute agonizing battle against the sheer force of gravity and the slippery, treacherous algae. His heavy hiking boots scraped violently against the rocks, trying desperately to find purchase on the unforgiving vertical incline. The rain lashed down with a brutal, blinding intensity, completely obscuring his vision. He blinked away the stinging salt water, focusing his seasoned analytical mind on a small, relatively flat ledge located about 30 feet up the steep cliff wall. It was not a path to salvation, but it was high enough to escape the immediate lethal surge of the evening tide. He just needed to survive the night, he told himself. He just needed to outlast the violent storm, and then he could focus on the absolute total destruction of his greedy family. He pushed upward with his good leg, ignoring the burning, acidic fatigue building in his massive muscles. But as he reached for another handhold, the dull, warning pressure in the center of his chest suddenly exploded into a catastrophic, blinding agony. It was not just an ache anymore. It felt as though a massive, heavy shipping container had been dropped directly onto his sternum, completely crushing the breath right out of his lungs. The intense, radiating pain shot aggressively down his left arm and traveled straight up into his rigid jawline. Marcus let out a ragged, agonizing groan, his thick fingers slipping dangerously from the wet stone. He collapsed heavily onto a slanted, jagged rock, his cheek pressing against the freezing, coarse surface. His fragile cardiovascular system, entirely deprived of its vital nitroglycerin, was going into absolute terrifying overdrive. His heart fluttered wildly, beating with a frantic, irregular rhythm, trapped like a desperate bird inside a collapsing cage. The world around him began to spin violently, the dark cliff walls blurring together with the churning white foam of the angry ocean. Panic, the ultimate enemy of survival, threatened to completely overwhelm his highly disciplined mind. If he panicked now, his elevated heart rate would kill him much faster than the freezing tide. He closed his eyes tightly, forcefully shutting out the chaotic, terrifying storm. He visualized the massive, orderly control room at the shipping port. When a massive system failed, you did not scream or cry. You calmly isolated the problem, and you rebooted the complex machinery. Breathe slowly. Marcus commanded himself, at his voice a barely audible, raspy whisper against the howling Oregon wind. Inhale for 4 seconds and exhale for 4 seconds. He forced his seizing lungs to expand, drawing the cold, wet coastal air deep into his chest. It felt like inhaling broken glass, but he maintained the steady mechanical rhythm. The intense branding iron pain in his chest did not disappear, but it slowly stopped expanding. He used his sheer, unadulterated anger as a powerful, warming fuel. He thought about Andre driving away in the warm, rented Jeep. He thought about Kendra holding his life-saving medicine, smiling that toxic, venomous smile, entirely focused on a $5 million insurance check. They had discarded him like a piece of broken machinery, a useless, rusting anchor. The white-hot rage pumped through his veins, fighting back the paralyzing, numbing cold. He forced his eyes open, his vision clearing just enough to see the small, flat ledge only 10 feet away. He dug his thick boots into the rock, once more crawling with a slow, agonizing, primal determination. The ocean roared below him, completely swallowing the exact spot where he had fallen just minutes before. The lethal tide was climbing higher, hungry for its promised victim. With one final massive exertion of pure willpower, Marcus dragged his heavy, soaking wet body onto the small, elevated rock shelf. He rolled onto his back completely and entirely exhausted his chest, heaving with shallow, ragged breaths. He was out of the direct reach of the crushing waves, but he was entirely exposed to the brutal, freezing storm. The dark, bruised sky opened up completely, pouring a torrential, freezing rain over his paralyzed body. The angina squeezed his heart with a relentless, heavy grip, a constant reminder that he was slowly dying on the desolate Oregon coast. He could not walk, he could not call for help, and he had absolutely no shelter from the plummeting, freezing temperatures. He lay there on the cold, hard stone, waiting for the long, terrifying night to either kill him or deliver a total miracle. "I will not let you win, Marcus," whispered to the empty, violent sky. "I will survive this trap. Andre and I will take back every single thing you stole from me." His eyes grew incredibly heavy, the sheer exhaustion and the lack of oxygen finally dragging him down into a dark, painless void. The sound of the crashing ocean slowly faded away, replaced by a strange, mechanical hum, echoing in the far distance as his consciousness completely slipped away into the black, freezing night. The mechanical hum grew louder, cutting through the fading howl of the Oregon coastal storm. The freezing black night slowly gave way to the pale, bruised gray of early morning. Marcus lay entirely motionless on the jagged rock shelf, his soaking wet, waterproof jacket stiff with the freezing coastal salt. His breathing was dangerously shallow, a faint, rattling wheeze escaping his blue, trembling lips. Down on the muddy, treacherous trail, a massive custom-built off-road truck ground to a powerful halt. The heavy vehicle, equipped with military-grade suspension and blazing LED light bars, easily dominated the hostile terrain. The driver cut the roaring engine, the sudden silence filled only by the crashing morning tide. The heavy door swung open and Isaiah stepped out into the freezing drizzle. He was a towering, broad-shouldered man wearing a rugged, weatherproof canvas jacket and thick leather work boots. Isaiah was a highly powerful property magnate, the man who quietly owned thousands of acres of this prime, untouched Oregon coastline. He was out surveying the massive storm damage to his private access roads, expecting to find downed pine trees and washed-out gravel. He absolutely did not expect to find a dying man on his private beach. Isaiah walked toward the edge of the rocky cove, his sharp, observant eyes scanning the violent waterline. He spotted the unnatural shape of Marcus, curled into a tight, freezing ball on the elevated stone ledge. Isaiah moved with surprising rapid agility for a man of his massive size, scaling the slick, treacherous rocks without a single moment of hesitation. He reached the narrow ledge and dropped heavily to his knees beside the unconscious man. "Hey, Isaiah!" shouted his deep voice carrying a commanding absolute authority. "Can you hear me, old man?" Marcus did not respond, his chest barely rising against the cold, wet stone. Isaiah reached out with a thick, calloused hand and gently rolled Marcus onto his back. He immediately saw the severe gray pallor of Marcus' face and the desperate, clutching grip Marcus had on his own chest. Isaiah was a man who had survived his own share of brutal, high-stress corporate wars, and he recognized the physical signs of a massive cardiovascular event instantly. Isaiah ripped open the heavy zipper of Marcus' waterproof jacket, exposing his freezing-soaked shirt underneath. He saw the faded vertical surgical scar running down Marcus' sternum, the undeniable permanent mark of a past open heart surgery. "You are going into full cardiac arrest," Isaiah muttered, completely assessing the dire, life-threatening situation. Isaiah did not waste a single second calling for emergency services, knowing the ambulances were at least an hour away. Instead, he reached into the deep breast pocket of his own heavy canvas jacket. He pulled out a small, familiar orange plastic bottle. As a high-powered magnate who managed immense daily stress, Isaiah carried the exact same emergency medication. He quickly popped the child-proof cap, shaking a tiny white nitroglycerin pill into his massive palm. He pried Marcus' cold blue lips apart and carefully placed the potent tablet directly under his tongue. "Hold on." Isaiah ordered, his voice a steady grounding anchor in the freezing chaos. "Just let the medicine dissolve and keep breathing for me." Marcus lay in the gray morning light, the bitter, sharp chemical taste blooming instantly in his dry mouth. Within seconds, the powerful vasodilator went to work rapidly expanding the constricted blood vessels around his failing, exhausted heart. The crushing, massive weight of the shipping container on his chest slowly began to lift just a fraction of an inch. A faint, desperate rush of oxygenated blood returned to his freezing extremities. Marcus gasped violently, his eyes flying open in sheer, unadulterated shock. He stared wildly up at the gray sky, and then at the massive, rugged stranger kneeling over him. "Easy now," Isaiah said, uncapping a heavy steel thermos and pouring a small cup of warm black coffee. "Take a very small sip of this. It will help raise your core temperature." Marcus drank the hot liquid, coughing weakly as the warmth slid down his freezing throat. He looked at the orange pill bottle in Isaiah's hand, the absolute undeniable proof of his miraculous salvation. "Who are you?" Marcus rasped, his voice sounding like dry, crushed gravel. "My name is Isaiah," the magnate replied, screwing the metal cap back onto the thermos. "I own this entire stretch of the coastline, and nobody dies on my property without my explicit permission. What exactly happened to you out here? The closest paved road is over 10 miles away." Marcus leaned back against the hard stone, his seasoned analytical mind slowly coming back online. He looked at Isaiah, recognizing the quiet, confident aura of a man who commanded immense resources and absolute power. Marcus did not offer a pathetic, rambling excuse, and he did not cry about his broken heart. "My son brought me out here," Marcus stated, his voice dropping into a cold, flat monotone that completely chilled the morning air. "He took my medication and he left me for the evening tide. He is trying to collect a $5 million insurance policy to pay off a massive underground gambling debt." Isaiah stared at him, his sharp eyes narrowing with a dark, terrifying understanding. He looked at Marcus' expensive, custom-fitted hiking boots and the high-quality waterproof gear, realizing this was no random, helpless vagrant. Isaiah saw the exact same cold, calculating fire in Marcus' eyes that he possessed in his own. "He left you to drown." Isaiah repeated, a slow, dangerous smile forming on his rugged face. "He made a very critical, fatal error, my friend. He forgot to check who actually owns the beach." Isaiah stood up, offering a massive, powerful hand to the fallen patriarch. "Let us get you to my house," Isaiah offered, pulling Marcus smoothly to his feet. "We need to get you warm, and then we need to prepare a very aggressive counterattack. If your son wants to play a high-stakes game, we are going to show him exactly how the big dogs bite." Marcus gripped Isaiah's hand tightly, feeling the life-saving warmth returning to his own fingers. He was no longer a discarded, helpless victim, freezing on a rock. He was a resurrected titan, walking toward an absolute inevitable vengeance. The heavy custom off-road truck climbed the steep, winding private road, leaving the treacherous cove far behind them. Isaiah drove with an easy, practiced precision, navigating the massive vehicle through a dense wall of ancient pine trees. The dark forest suddenly opened up, revealing a sprawling, ultra-modern fortress of glass and dark steel, perfectly integrated into the sheer cliffside. It was an absolute architectural marvel, a billionaire sanctuary completely hidden from the public eye. Marcus sat in the heated passenger seat, feeling the aggressive, life-saving warmth finally penetrating his freezing, stiff joints. The heavy truck glided to a smooth halt inside a massive, brightly lit garage, surrounded by a fleet of exotic, high-performance vehicles. "Welcome to my quiet little retreat," Isaiah said, cutting the powerful engine. "Let us get you out of those soaking wet clothes and get some hot food into your system." Marcus followed the towering property magnate into an expansive glass-walled living area, offering a panoramic, dizzying view of the violent Pacific Ocean below. The sheer scale of Isaiah's wealth was immediately apparent, but it was not loud or arrogant like Kendra desperate displays. It was a quiet, absolute power, precisely the kind of power Marcus wielded in his own corporate empire. A private on-call physician quickly examined Marcus in a pristine medical suite, confirming his cardiovascular system was stabilizing thanks to the incredibly timely dose of nitroglycerin. Dressed in dry, thick cashmere garments, provided by his host Marcus, walked back into the main living space, his sharp mind completely focused on the impending warfare. Isaiah sat at a massive, sleek control desk surrounded by multiple glowing high-definition monitors. He was typing rapidly on a glowing keyboard, his thick fingers moving with a surprising fluid grace. "You said your son was deep in debt to the underground," Isaiah noted, not taking his sharp eyes off the screens. "And you said they froze his corporate accounts. Where exactly do you think a desperate broke man goes when he thinks he just secured a $5 million payday?" Marcus walked over to the desk, standing tall and completely steady. "He goes to the most expensive, highly visible place he can find," Marcus answered, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He needs to project absolute fake confidence to keep the mob enforcers at bay until the insurance check clears. Isaiah smiled a dark, predatory expression that perfectly matched Marcus' own calculating fury. I own a significant stake in the hospitality networks around Portland, Isaiah explained, tapping a final command on his keyboard. My security teams have direct backdoor access to the camera feeds of every major luxury hotel in the downtown sector. If they are celebrating your tragic demise, we will find them. The large central monitor flickered briefly before snapping into a crystal-clear, high-definition live feed. The camera angle looked down upon the opulent gold-trimmed dining room of the absolute most expensive hotel in the city, and there, sitting at a prime corner table surrounded by empty champagne flutes, were Andre and Kendra. Marcus stared at the bright screen, his massive hands gripping the edge of the glass desk. He watched his only son, the boy he had protected and funded for 30 years, laughing uproariously at something Kendra just said. Andre was wearing a brand new custom-tailored suit, completely replacing the one ruined by the mob enforcer in the parking garage. Kendra looked absolutely radiant, her hair perfectly styled, sipping from a crystal glass of incredibly expensive imported champagne. They did not look like devastated, grieving children. They looked like massive lottery winners, completely intoxicated by their lethal, brutal success. Let us listen to the grieving family, Isaiah suggested, sliding a dial upward on his sophisticated audio console. The faint ambient noise of the luxury restaurant filled the quiet cliffside fortress, followed by the sharp, clear voices of the murderous couple. I still cannot believe how easy it was. Kendra laughed, her voice dripping with a toxic, sickening relief. He just laid there on the freezing rocks, completely pathetic. He practically handed us the $5 million, Andre. Andre took a large, greedy bite of a lavish steak, chewing with an arrogant, open mouth. We earned that money, Andre stated, waving his silver fork in the air. We put up with his cheap, embarrassing behavior for years, Kendra. The old man finally paid his ultimate dues. Once the death certificate clears on Monday, I will wire the $2 million to Desmond, and we are completely free. Marcus listened to the horrific, casual discussion of his own murder. He did not feel a single ounce of sorrow, and he did not shed a single pathetic tear. The fatherly love that had blinded him for decades was completely, permanently dead. It had drowned in the freezing tide of the Oregon coast, leaving only the cold, calculating logistics expert in its place. They are spending money they do not actually have. Marcus observed, his voice completely devoid of any human emotion. They must have maxed out a high-interest underground bridge loan banking entirely on the impending insurance payout. Isaiah nodded, leaning back in his heavy leather chair. They are building a massive house of cards, Marcus. They are completely drunk on a fake victory, entirely unaware that the dead man is watching their every single move. What is our next logistical step, my friend? Marcus looked at the screen, watching Kendra order another highly expensive bottle of champagne from a bowing waiter. We let them rack up the massive bills tonight. Marcus commanded, his eyes burning with a relentless, absolute justice. Let them sleep in their fake, temporary safety. Tomorrow we are going completely public, and we are going to burn their entire fraudulent empire to the absolute ground. Andre had secured a temporary, highly illegal shadow loan from a secondary street lender early that morning. He used the entirely fabricated story of his father suffering a tragic, fatal accident, leaning heavily on the absolute promise of the upcoming $5 million insurance claim as ironclad collateral. The desperate borrowed cash was quickly transferred into a temporary, untraceable digital account. Armed with this highly toxic fake wealth, they felt completely and utterly invincible, stepping proudly out of the luxury hotel and into the cool, rain-washed streets of the downtown shopping district. Kendra walked with a sickening, arrogant swagger, leading Andre directly into the most exclusive high-end designer boutiques in the city. She did not look at a single price tag, tossing expensive imported leather handbags and delicate silk garments carelessly onto the pristine glass counters. She demanded the absolute highest level of service, speaking to the retail workers like they were utter disposable garbage, completely intoxicated by her murderous, fraudulent payday. Every single swipe of the temporary debit card fed her massive, uncontrollable ego. Andre was equally consumed by the dark, poisonous thrill of their horrific crime. He marched aggressively into a heavily guarded high-end jeweler, demanding to see their absolute best, most exclusive inventory. He pointed a shaking, greedy finger at a massive, diamond-encrusted platinum watch, desperately needing to replace the heavy gold timepiece Silas had crushed into the concrete parking garage. The nervous salesman ran the temporary black debit card the machine, chirping a cheerful electronic approval. Andre strapped the heavy, ostentatious watch to his bruised wrist, feeling the crushing, paralyzing terror of the mob enforcers temporarily, blissfully fade away. Miles away from the arrogant shopping spree, safe inside the fortified, glass-walled cliffside sanctuary, Marcus and Isaiah watched the entire disgusting spectacle completely unfold. Isaiah had seamlessly and quietly tapped into the secure retail transaction networks mirroring the digital receipts directly onto his massive, glowing monitors. The bright screen filled with a cascading rapid list of highly aggressive, completely unearned luxury purchases. $10,000 at a boutique, $30,000 at the jeweler's, $5,000 on a custom-tailored wardrobe. Marcus stood with his muscular arms crossed tightly over his thick, warm cashmere sweater, his face carved from absolute freezing stone. He did not feel a single ounce of paternal disappointment, only a deep, calculating, and highly surgical disgust. "Look at them." Marcus stated, his voice a low, rumbling vibration in the quiet, high-tech room. "They just left my broken, dying body on a freezing rock, and they are already happily dancing on my grave. They actually think this stolen money will somehow wash the cold blood completely off their hands, Isaiah." Isaiah took a slow, deliberate sip of his hot black coffee. His sharp, observant eyes locked intensely on the live digital feeds. "They are digging a massive, absolutely inescapable pit for themselves," Isaiah noted, tapping a heavy, calloused finger on the pristine glass desk. "The shadow lender who gave them that temporary dangerous cash charges a highly predatory, exorbitant daily interest rate. If your insurance payout does not miraculously arrive in their account by Monday morning, that secondary lender will violently chop them to pieces before Desmond even gets a chance to blink. They are incredibly, profoundly stupid," Marcus playing a highly lethal game of financial roulette with ruthless killers. The advanced camera feeds switched seamlessly on the monitors tracking Andre and Kendra as they finally returned to a lavish, heavily upgraded luxury suite. Their arms were completely loaded with heavy branded shopping bags practically overflowing with stolen, blood-soaked luxury. They threw the highly expensive merchandise onto the massive king-sized bed, completely exhausted by their own arrogant, bottomless greed. Kendra pulled a heavy bottle of imported vodka from the stocked minibar, pouring two massive, overflowing glasses, eagerly celebrating their brutal, unforgivable sin. They sat on the edge of the plush bed, clinking their crystal glasses together in a toast to their own absolute horrific survival. They truly believed they had won the ultimate twisted and violent lottery. They deeply believed the cold, unforgiving ocean had permanently erased their massive problems, completely washing away the old man in the cheap suit. They felt completely untouchable, elevated above the rules of normal society, protected by their newly acquired, completely fraudulent wealth. But as they drank their highly expensive liquor, laughing loudly in the sterile luxury of their temporary rented room, the 48-hour deadline established by the massive mob enforcers continued to violently, undeniably tick away. They were completely unaware that every single dollar they spent was a heavily monitored, perfectly documented nail in their own coffins. And far above the crashing, freezing views of the treacherous Oregon coastline, Marcus was fully prepared and highly motivated to drop an absolute crushing mountain of justice on their fragile, temporary, and doomed empire. The afternoon sun broke through the heavy Oregon storm clouds, casting a harsh, bright light across the expansive glass walls of the cliffside fortress. Marcus stood in the center of the pristine, high-tech study, staring at his own reflection in a massive, floor-to-ceiling mirror. He was no longer the tired, beaten father wearing a cheap, rain-soaked gray suit. A master tailor, flown in privately by Isaiah that very morning, stepped back to admire his rapid, flawless work. Marcus now wore a charcoal, custom-cut Italian suit woven from the absolute finest wool, fitting his broad, muscular shoulders like a suit of modern armor. A crisp, brilliant white shirt and a deep crimson silk tie completed the terrifying, powerful transformation. Isaiah walked into the room holding a heavy, solid platinum watch. He tossed the expensive timepiece to Marcus, who caught it effortlessly with one massive hand. "Put that on your wrists," Isaiah commanded, his deep voice echoing against the glass. "A dead man does not need to check the time, but a resurrected billionaire has incredibly strict deadlines to meet. We go live on the local Portland news networks in exactly 20 minutes. Marcus fastened the heavy, cold metal around his wrist, feeling the absolute weight of his newly weaponized wealth. He turned away from the mirror, his sharp, calculating eyes locking onto the property magnate. "Is the broadcast network fully secured?" Marcus asked, his tone dropping into a low, rumbling vibration of pure, unadulterated menace. "I need absolute assurance that this feed will interrupt every single channel in that luxury hotel." Isaiah smiled a dark, predatory grin that exposed his perfectly white teeth. "I own a massive controlling share in the regional broadcasting syndicate," Isaiah explained, walking toward the heavy oak double doors. "I told the network executives I was announcing a $50 million infrastructural port expansion funded entirely by a silent, highly elusive logistics titan. The news anchors are completely salivating over the sheer financial magnitude of the story. They will cut into regular programming, projecting your face into every single living room and hotel suite across the entire city." They walked together out of the study, stepping onto a massive, sweeping outdoor terrace that hung directly over the violent, crashing Pacific Ocean. A professional news crew was already swarming the pristine stone patio, frantically setting up bright, blinding spotlights and heavy high-definition cameras. The frantic producer, a nervous man holding a digital clipboard, rushed forward to greet the two massive titans of industry. "Mr. Isaiah," the producer stammered, his eyes darting quickly to Marcus, "we are incredibly honored to host this exclusive breaking broadcast. The studio is fully prepped, and we are counting down to a live, seamless transmission." Isaiah waved the nervous man away, directing Marcus to stand behind a sleek glass podium, positioned perfectly against the breathtaking, dramatic backdrop of the ocean. Marcus gripped the edges of the podium, his thick, calloused fingers pressing hard against the smooth, cold glass. He looked directly into the dark, unblinking lens of the primary broadcast camera. He did not see a piece of electronic equipment. He saw the panicked, bruised face of his treacherous son and the toxic, greedy eyes of his murderous daughter-in-law. The producer raised his hand, counting down the final seconds with his fingers, 5, 4, 3, 2, and the red light on top of the heavy camera blinked on. The evening news anchor, sitting in a sterile, brightly lit studio miles away in downtown Portland, smiled professionally into the camera. "We interrupt our standard programming for a massive, highly exclusive breaking story," the anchor announced, her voice filled with absolute manufactured excitement. "A monumental $50 million partnership has just been forged to completely overhaul the Portland shipping infrastructure. We go live now to the private coastal estate of local property magnate Isaiah to meet the mysterious mainland billionaire funding this massive historic project." The broadcast feed cut seamlessly to the cliffside terrace. The bright spotlights illuminated Marcus, completely erasing any shadow of the broken, abandoned man from the tidal rocks. He stood tall, radiating absolute undeniable power, looking like a terrifying god of modern industry. "Good evening, Portland." Marcus began, his deep, resonant voice booming through the highly sensitive microphones and transmitting directly into the city. "My name is Marcus, and I have spent 40 years quietly building and managing the logistical arteries of this massive country. I know exactly how to build a fortress, and I know exactly how to burn one to the ground." He paused, letting his sharp, piercing gaze burn through the camera lens, fully aware of the absolute crushing terror his face would induce. He was a ghost, stepping out of the freezing ocean, wearing a $5,000 suit. "I came to this beautiful city to make a monumental investment." Marcus continued, a cold, surgical precision lacing every single word. "But before we can build a strong, reliable future, we must aggressively sweep away the toxic, rotting garbage of the past. I believe in absolute, strict accountability. I believe that every single debt must be paid in full without exception. If you build your fragile empire on lies and stolen money, the foundation will ultimately violently collapse." Isaiah stepped into the frame, standing shoulder to shoulder with Marcus, presenting a united, unbreakable wall of sheer corporate dominance. "We are launching a full forensic audit of the local supply chains immediately," Isaiah added, his voice a heavy, dangerous rumble. "We are tracking every single missing dollar, and we will aggressively prosecute the thieves hiding in the shadows." Marcus leaned slightly closer to the microphone, delivering his final lethal payload directly to the luxury hotel suite. "The time for hiding is completely over," Marcus stated, his eyes completely dark and merciless. "I am back. I am watching every single transaction, and the absolute final bill is coming due right now." The camera slowly zoomed in on Marcus, cold, unyielding face burning, his resurrected, terrifying image into the broadcast before the feed silently cut back to the stunned, speechless studio anchor. The trap was fully primed, the bait was dropped, and the absolute destruction of his treacherous family had officially begun. The massive flat-screen television, mounted flush against the expensive silk wallpaper, played a meaningless local talk show. Andre lay back on the plush, king-sized bed, surrounded entirely by pristine shopping bags from the most exclusive boutiques in Portland. He held a crystal glass of imported vodka, feeling the warm, toxic burn of the expensive liquor, completely erasing the terrifying memory of the freezing coastal rocks. Kendra stood in front of the large vanity mirror, admiring a heavy diamond-encrusted necklace secured tightly around her throat. They were completely insulated in their fake, fraudulent luxury, insulated by the absolute belief that the cold ocean had permanently solved their massive problems. Suddenly, the cheerful music on the television cut out, replaced instantly by a sharp, urgent news graphic. The bright screen flashed a breaking news alert, casting a harsh red glow across the dark, lavish bedroom. Kendra sighed loudly, annoyed by the sudden loud interruption to her perfect, murderous evening. "Turn that down," Kendra ordered, twisting her neck to see the sparkling diamonds in the mirror. "I cannot even hear myself think with that obnoxious news alert." Andre reached lazily for the sleek silver remote control resting on the soft, expensive duvet. He pressed his thumb against the volume button, but he completely froze, staring blankly at the bright, high-definition screen. The local news anchor was speaking rapidly, her voice trembling with genuine manufactured excitement. "A monumental $50 million partnership has just been forged," the anchor announced, her voice echoing loudly in the quiet hotel suite. "We go live now to the private coastal estate of local property magnate Isaiah to meet the mysterious mainland billionaire funding this massive project." The screen shifted smoothly to the dramatic, sweeping outdoor terrace suspended high above the violent, crashing Pacific Ocean. Andre sat up slowly, the crystal glass shaking violently in his bruised, terrified hand. He recognized the brutal, sheer cliffs in the background. It was the exact same treacherous coastline where they had abandoned a dying man just hours ago. Kendra turned away from the vanity mirror, sensing the sudden suffocating tension rolling off her husband. "What is wrong with you?" Kendra asked, stepping closer to the edge of the large bed. Andre could not speak. He could not breathe. He just pointed a trembling, rigid finger directly at the television. Kendra followed his gaze, looking at the massive screen, and her entire world instantly, violently collapsed. The camera zoomed in tightly, focusing on the two towering men standing behind the sleek glass podium. One was the famous, elusive property magnate. The other man, standing tall and radiating absolute, undeniable power, was Marcus. The crystal glass of imported vodka slipped from Andre, hand falling heavily onto the pristine white carpet. It shattered instantly, soaking the expensive fabric, but neither of them moved a single paralyzed muscle. "That is completely impossible," Kendra whispered, her voice a fragile, terrified breath. "We left him on the rocks, Andre. He was dying, he could not breathe, and the freezing tide was coming in. But there he stood, projected vividly into their luxury suite. He was not wearing a cheap, rain-soaked gray suit. He was wearing a custom charcoal Italian masterpiece, looking like a terrifying god of modern industry. His gray hair was perfectly trimmed, and his broad, muscular shoulders filled the expensive fabric with absolute physical menace. "Good evening," Portland Marcus said on the television, his deep, resonant voice booming out of the high-quality speakers. Andre let out a pathetic, whimpering sound, backing away across the large mattress until his back hit the heavy wooden headboard. "He is alive," Andre choked out, pulling his knees tightly to his chest. "He is alive, Kendra, and he is a billionaire. My name is Marcus." The television continued transmitting the cold, surgical threat directly into their isolated room. "I know exactly how to build a fortress, and I know exactly how to burn one to the ground." Kendra clutched her throat, her manicured fingers digging painfully into the heavy stolen diamond necklace. "He's looking right at us," Kendra shrieked, backing away from the bright screen. "He knows exactly where we are, Andre. I believe that every single debt must be paid in full, without exception," Marcus stated on the broadcast, his eyes burning with a relentless absolute justice. "If you build your fragile empire on lies and stolen money, the foundation will ultimately violently collapse." The sheer, horrifying reality of their situation crashed over them like the freezing, violent waves of the Oregon coast. The $5 million life insurance policy, the ultimate golden ticket that justified their brutal patricide, was completely and entirely fake. The man was not dead, which meant the massive payout was never ever coming. The shadow loan, Andre screamed, jumping off the bed with absolute frantic energy. "The secondary street lender gave us $50,000 in cash today, based entirely on the pending insurance claim. We spent almost all of it this afternoon, Kendra. We bought watches and bags in this massive hotel suite." Kendra looked at the expensive shopping bags scattered carelessly across the luxurious room, and she suddenly felt violently, physically ill. The borrowed cash was gone, replaced by useless branded leather and shiny rocks. The predatory street lender expected immediate full repayment by Monday morning. If they defaulted on the highly illegal shadow loan, the violent collectors would absolutely slaughter them. And Desmond Andre wept, pulling at his own hair in pure, unadulterated hysteria. "Desmond gave us exactly 48 hours to deliver $2 million in cash. Silas crushed my watch in the parking garage, Kendra. Silas promised to skin us alive if the money did not clear." The television broadcast continued to play, offering absolutely no mercy. "The time for hiding is completely over," Marcus warned, leaning closer to the camera lens. "I am back. I am watching every single transaction, and the absolute final bill is coming due right now." The screen cut back to the shocked studio anchor, but the terrifying message was already perfectly delivered. Marcus was not just alive, he was an infinitely powerful, highly connected titan who held their entire fraudulent existence in his massive hands. He had quietly funded their arrogant lifestyle for decades, and now he was completely surgically dismantling it. "We have to run!" Kendra screamed, grabbing a heavy imported leather suitcase from the corner of the room. "We have to pack right now, Andre. We need to drive out of Portland tonight before Silas sees this news broadcast." "Where do we go?" Andre yelled back, tears streaming down his bruised, terrified face. "We have absolutely no money, Kendra. My father froze the primary trust, and the credit cards are entirely dead. We used a fake name to get this hotel room, but we cannot buy a plane ticket, and we cannot buy gas to escape the city." They were completely trapped, completely surrounded by highly expensive stolen merchandise, with absolutely no avenue of escape. The deadly mob enforcers were closing in from the